tried calling Justin in the office to discuss the logistics, and Justin wasn't there.
Well, what I have in my agenda
What
says,
I'm saying is, this is not a joint workshop if the select board is the panel and the planning board is part of the public.
okay,
I'm a little
well,
frustrated by that.
all right, so there's two different places. If you look on the agenda item, I didn't see what was on the top. I didn't write that, but if you look at the agenda item was what I was looking at, I'm sorry, Bob, if there was confusion. It says to hold a workshop with the code enforcement officer to identify and discuss areas of the zoning ordinance inherited from Cumberland that need to be addressed. So that's fine if the planning board members are more than happy to be able to speak. So I don't care what you do. But the purpose of it was the selectmen wanted to talk to the code enforcement officer, and we thought it was a good idea to invite the planning board. So, but that's just semantics. So we can elevate everybody that wants to be, who's on the planning board, to be a panelist, but let's wait until we actually, I don't even see the code enforcement officer on here. Does anyone see him on here? Justin?
No, I don't yet. I was just texting him today, so he was planning on being here, so.
Right, well, it's only 6:02, so, and we're still, we've got, I think the, we don't have Bo yet either.
Or Mark.
Mark's won't be here today.
Was he playing that whatever?
Yeah, the
Yeah,
Audubon, he's doing a fundraiser for Audubon. We changed the meeting date. So that's what happened. Okay, Bob, your hand's still up. Do you have something else you want to say?
Sorry, no.
Okay. So Justin, if you want to elevate the planning board to be panelists, that's fine. But please raise your hand if you want to speak, just so that we keep some semblance of order.
Bob, can you name your other members? I put Carol and you up now. Who else do I need to add? That's here.
Travis Nadeau. Paul Baleska.
Oh yeah, Paul. Yeah, I see that. Okay, got him. Add him.
You got Travis.
Oh, there. Yeah. Oh yeah, there he is at the bottom. Yeah.
Kyle Korber.
I didn't see Kyle on. Oh, there he is. He's red. Is John Wilson on the planning board?
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so he's on here.
Sorry.
Esther Danielson. There's
Okay.
7 members.
Yeah,
So I
is
would
that-
assume it's probably Bill. That would be her.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Using his iPad.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, you have all the members of the planning board on, and I'm going to mute now.
Okay, thanks. What's the telephone number of 207-7493? Is that wouldn't be the code enforcement officer, would it?
I can look. Hold on. I don't know. He's Jim Butler to me, so I don't know what his number is.
No, I don't either.
Let's see. No, that's not him.
And he knew it was at 6 o'clock,
Yeah,
and we can't really go on to anything else because people,
I can call him. Hold on.
Okay, yeah, that's a good idea. Well, if anyone knows how to sing, maybe we could have like a little concert. John, do you have your guitar there or anything? You know, we could do something to entertain ourselves.
Sorry, I'm late.
I could sing, but that would end the meeting really quickly.
Oh, it would? Oh, okay. Well, if I did, it really would end it.
Sorry, I'm late. I couldn't remember the password to my computer.
Oh, it wasn't the password getting in here. It was just to your computer.
Yeah, to my computer. I used it so long, I forgot the password.
I don't see Paul Beleska here as a panelist. Did he not get elevated? We need to make sure that we get if we're going to have anybody, we need everybody. Justin's probably on the phone. Okay, good.
He's trying to join now.
Okay, great. Well, while he's trying to join, the Board of Selectmen has to, we have to do a roll call to make sure that we can all hear each other. Mr. Corson?
Spited the picture, I'm here.
Okay. I thought you got prettier overnight. Mr. Beaupre?
Here.
All right. Ms. Beleska?
Here.
All right. Ms. Damon is here. Mr. Horia?
Here.
And Ms. Ofant?
Here.
Okay. So we've got everybody who needs to be here. And Mark Dyer had a previous commitment and we changed the date of the meeting. So he is sorry that he cannot be here. Okay, now we have Jim Butler, who is at the party. So welcome, Jim, if you want to unmute, and Paul's on here. I don't think we've ever met. So it's nice to see you, Jim.
How are you? Sorry, I
Good.
was late. I had a hard time joining for some reason, but I think I got it figured out on my end.
Okay.
Yep.
I had trouble myself getting on. Just to let you know, this is a workshop and we wanted to meet with you as the code enforcement officer to discuss different parts of this, any suggestions you might have about the zoning that you find that you have been, having issues with. One of the big issues, I guess, for the Board of Selectmen or for some of the Board of Selectmen is that when we became a town, we inherited Cumberland's ordinance. And the idea was we didn't have time during the transition to actually address all of that. And we had so much to do to create a government. So we said that that would be a priority and that to go through all of that line by line and see what really we wanted to keep and what we didn't want to keep. And it's been 15 years and we haven't finished that project yet. And I don't even know how far along we are in it, but there's a lot of confusion in the community because some things are enforced and some things aren't. Some people in the community feel like you have to be calling on your neighbor if you see them doing something that they shouldn't be doing or whatever. Just to give some examples, and this is this is something that I didn't know until I actually went through it. I read the whole thing over the last day. That you're supposed to have an acre for a horse. If you have a horse, you're not supposed to let chickens go loose. These are just some little things that I happen to pick up, that if you have a utility that is either above or underground, that's not on a public way, you have to go to the Adjustment and Appeals Board, and I don't think that's happening. And so there's a bunch of things that aren't happening, and maybe they don't need to happen. And so that's the kind of input we're looking for you. So if you would like to start, and then we'll go to the board, and then we'll go to the planning board.
Sure, absolutely. So, I've been on the island now for, I think, 2.5 years as your code enforcement officer. And, obviously it's different out there enforcing codes and ordinances. Just the nature of being on an island is difficult. So I was working full-time for the town of Scarborough as a code officer, and recently was hired back as a director of code enforcement for the town of Old Orchard Beach. Each community is unique in their ordinances and what fits and what doesn't. And I think exactly like you said, that a lot of the stuff that came over, was from Cumberland and didn't really mesh well with the island, and particularly with smaller enterprises. More recently, we've had some complaints come in that we've investigated, and it puts me as a code officer in a tough spot, because we do have some pretty stringent ordinances that say some specific things, but understanding that we're on an island and activities such need to take place. And a lot of people have small enterprises where it kind of falls into a bit of a gray area. And yes, one person could read the ordinance and see it one way, but I try to look at the ordinances as if I'm going to have to write a notice of violation and bring this to court and, kind of speak on the town's behalf, and making sure that we're fair and consistent across the boards. If we're going up after one business or one property owner, that we're not picking and choosing, and we're being consistent across, the boards is certainly important. So, one of the bigger changes that I think would make sense is to look at some of the specifics around businesses. And certainly we have a good process to go to the planning board for site plan review approval, but it's the in-between with small enterprises that, may fall underneath, in the district regulations and island residential and island business as a home occupation. And what's the threshold of that? In the community that I work in currently, we kind of have some different categories, and maybe we need to add some definitions to our ordinances, like contractor storage yard. We don't really have that, but some of the places on the island are acting as that. And it exempts some activities as well, like agriculture and other things that are accessory to those. So it's a broad spectrum of things that are covered of what's allowed and what's not allowed, and what the process is for site plan approval, and what the process is for going to the Board of Adjustments. About 1.5 years ago, we had somebody that had a sawmill, temporary sawmill, and a complaint came in, and that had to go to the Board of Adjustments for approval to operate a temporary sawmill. So just some examples of some things where we want to make sure that the impact isn't adversely affecting the community or the abutters, but we also want to make sure that the essentials can happen, along the way, and people can make a living on the island, and people can provide services on the island. So, I'm just the person that's responsible for enforcing these, and it's difficult. And, obviously, I work at the direction of the town administrator and the select board. And, I think we can make some improvements on some of our definitions, and I think it would be great to maybe workshop this even further to dig into the district regulations and see, do we want to put some more definitions in there and make some more specifics around home occupations or contractor storage yards, or like smaller enterprises that are taking place that are essential to work getting done on the island.
In the other towns, Jim, where you work, is that when those kinds of things happen, is that a review by the planning board, or is it a combination of the planning board and a citizens committee, or the town council, or the board of selectmen? I mean, who takes the lead, and or should the board of selectmen be then asking the planning board to do something, or should we set up another committee, or what's the process? What do you feel the process is?
Your question is, what would be the process for amending the ordinances?
Yeah, to actually go through it the way we had originally planned.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be good if the select board, a lot of towns that I've worked in, a lot of time the function of the planning board is to be looking at ordinance updates. And I know Bob Ernest has been doing a lot of updates with some of the ordinances and making some adjustments and bringing those forward to be amended. But I think having some sort of a working workshop where you have the planning board who represents, the town, but also making it so the public can come as well and give their input is important. But, having some direction, I guess, from the select board is important on, what would you like to see? And, typically making sure that it's consistent with the town's comprehensive plan and that, it's not going to adversely impact businesses, but make it so that the rules are more black and white. From my end, as the code officer, I have powers that are given to me by the ordinances that allow me to issue permits for certain things, which are considered permitted uses. But there's other things that allow these activities to happen by going to the Board of Adjustment and Appeals, which, in the Island Residential District, Section B, talks about those things that I can't get permission to, but that goes to the Board of Adjustments, they can. But once it hits a certain threshold, and I'm kind of the filter for that, it has to go to site plan approval for the planning board, which I think that process is great. But it's the in-between between the permitted uses and the special exceptions and, where some of these existing businesses fall in that have been in operation for a while. But I think workshopping it at the planning board level to get into the weeds is where we need to be to make some of these adjustments to answer your question.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone else on the board of selectmen who would like to speak? Jay or Jen or Bo? Jen?
Just in listening to what Jim said, it sounds like the planning board has a lot of work to do, because that's what I assume their job is to review those things and get together with Jim Butler and make some changes that they then bring to the board for approval or whatever. I think that we don't need another committee or a board, but to look towards the planning board for help.
Thank you, Jen. Yeah, I agree with Jen, and I don't mean to imply at all that the planning board hasn't done anything in 15 years, because they've done a lot of work and they've been working on things related to sea level rise, aquifer protection, and all that kind of thing. But this is more like in a different category of, okay, this is the day-to-day stuff. For example, if I were going to build a house that was off the main road, I would have to build a road that was 50 feet wide and was better than any of the roads that are on Shabig. And there is a way to modify that in the zoning, but it's, some of those kinds of things that I think are going to get in our way if we're trying to even come close to having this be a place where people can even halfway afford to live here. But anyway, how about you, Jay? Any thoughts? Okay, how about you, Bo?
I do agree that the ordinances need to be looked at. I was looking at the ordinances today for the residential district, the regulations and stuff, and one that I found quite funny is you need to go see the Board of Adjustment and Appeals if you want a boat building, boat storage, or marina, subject to site review. And I don't know how many people on Shabig have gotten to see has got that to store their boat on their property. So I think, there's a few little lines that need to be looked at. And also would like to hear from Bob, mainly because he's in charge of the planning board, and just to see where they're at and what their thoughts are on this.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do is to, I see Jay's unmuted now. I found another place, Bo, in the zoning, actually where it talks about storage of fishing gear, traps, boats, and that kind of thing where it's allowed. So there may be some inconsistencies too. Jay, would you like something before I turn it over to say something?
I would just like to echo some of the things that I've heard. I think it would be great if the planning board, as they are more intimately involved in this than anybody else, would come back and say, there are a few things we got to look at and maybe get rid of, sidewalks and other subdivision requirements. There are a lot of, it strikes me, having read all this a couple of times, that there are a number of things that would be, just should be struck because they're just totally inappropriate. And that might be the planning board's role in conjunction with the code officer, to come back and say, we really ought to take a look at these. Here's a list of things we should get rid of, and not necessarily redo the whole thing in one fell swoop, but certainly work through it piecemeal and, get rid of the stuff that makes absolutely no sense.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Jen.
That's kind of the overall picture, but I also think it's really important that the things that have been kind of brought to our attention not be put on hold until, who knows when. I think that the complaints that have been mounting up really need to be addressed, and I hope that those are tackled sooner than later.
Thank you. Okay, so Bob, would you like to start with the planning board, and then we'll see who else wants to chime in?
Well, sure. I'll say this. It is, as a person who used to not be on the planning board, but was a contractor, it's really easy. It was really easy for me to rhetorically describe specifics in the ordinance that I thought didn't make sense. Once I became part of the planning board and eventually became chair of the planning board and began digging into it, I began to understand things like the fact that the land use ordinances that I would not say we inherited, I would point out that we voted them in town meeting. That's a little different than inheriting. The town decided to take those on. I have not seen anything formally from the select board or the town administrator or town meeting specifically pointing out places in the ordinance that they would like to be addressed. And that is how the ordinances call for them to be addressed. What the planning board has been working on is an ongoing list of items that have come up in workshop format that the planning board has prioritized and reprioritized over the past 5 years. And in conjunction with the comprehensive plan, gone about making changes 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 at a time. For example, in 2018, we split the shoreland zone from the zoning ordinance, from the land use ordinance, at the recommendation of the code officer at the time, so that we could make further improvements to the land use ordinance without having to get permission from the state. Because if your shoreland zone is in the same ordinance as your land use, other than the shoreland, then the state has to be involved in any changes that you make. So we've been in that process. We proposed 4 changes to the ordinance along the lines of some of the things that you guys are talking about for the last town meeting. They inadvertently did not make it to the warrant. They will be on, I hope, will be on the next warrant, and we will continue to do that work. Most recently, our work has been focused on an open space plan, which is one of the primary driving philosophies of the comprehensive plan as illuminated by all the workshops that went into the comprehensive plan. And after talking with people from different state agencies, the Maine Municipal Association, the Planning Association for the state of Maine, we decided that getting an open space plan in place would help us set a baseline and a starting point to attack things like what Jay described. I think we can all agree that the major subdivision ordinance is an inappropriate set of language and paragraphs and reference points. I don't think, maybe there are people in this meeting who think we need curbs, sidewalks, and streetlights in subdivisions, but the current direction of the planning board, once the open space plan is approved, is to use that as the jumping off point to either write an additional set of subdivision language that points out the benefits of a conservation subdivision, or we might decide to suggest to town meeting that we replace the major subdivision ordinance with a conservation subdivision ordinance. So we are working on those kind of things. One thing that became clear to me when I first joined the planning board, for me, it was extremely attractive to say, let's throw it out and start over. Once we dug into the mechanics of it, we decided, and I think rightly, to deal with those things that are not a match on an issue by issue basis. I will say that some of the rhetorical examples that were cited earlier, if you dig into the language on them, I think I would certainly say that's a good piece of regulation. For example, the language around home occupations specifically states that there has to be a home there for any consideration of a home occupation to be part of the process. So if you are running businesses or storing equipment for a business on the island, and your home is not on that piece of property, then under the current language, that piece of property needs to be in the business zone. We have a business zone. And if it's not in the business zone, there are processes by which you could apply for an exception. That has not been done in the example that we're talking about. So to me, it's not a gray area. It's quite black and white. What is being done in that particular example is not consistent with our code. And from the standpoint of the values represented in the residential code, I, for one, would not want to have a pile of equipment in a residential lot next to my residential lot.
So Bob, we're not actually going
Can I
through
finish,
that.
please? Can I finish, please?
Yeah, because we're running out of time and there's a lot of people who want to speak.
Right, you asked me to speak. The other thing I would mention about some of the complaints at hand is that they are far simpler than that one. They're strictly examples of projects being done that were not permitted. That's black and white. You have to get a building permit, for example, to build a structure that goes over the high tide line. If you add a screen porch to a house, you have to get a building permit for that. Those are black and white, and I don't want to let this discussion, which the workshop and specific suggestions are welcomed, but I don't want to let that get in the way, to Jen's point, get in the way of enforcing what I would believe should be enforced. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Going back to inherited from Cumberland, that was the term that the transition committee used. And you're right. I don't think there was anything that said specifically at town meeting that this was going to happen, but we had to accept something. And so that's how that happened. Is there somebody else from the planning board who would like to speak? And let's try to keep it to how do we go forward? How does the planning board want to receive these kinds of things? Some of the issues that have come up. I mean, one that's come up for years, for the last 15 years, is the definition of a shed, for example. Do you want the Board of Selectmen to brainstorm a list and give it to you? Do you want Jim to? Do you want the general public, or all of the above? So that's one question. So anyone else on the planning board who would like to speak about, any thoughts about what's the most efficient way to review this and figure out what do we want to keep and what do we want to modify?
Carol here, I'll keep it quick.
Sure.
Planning board and the planning board ordinance is tasked with reviewing and periodically updating the land use ordinances. So we have taken that task on and continue to do that. And so I think it's clearly in our purview. We focused quite a bit for a period of time on the shoreline zone ordinance because we had a lot of violations on the island. So we focused on both education, but also clarifying, and as Bob said, pulling out that ordinance because the state periodically updates the shoreline zoning requirements. So, I guess one of my comments would be that, yes, you're welcome to send your suggestions to the planning board. When we have public hearings on ordinance changes, we don't typically see the selectmen at those hearings. It would be great if you participate. And I think, we'd be happy to do additional workshops going forward. We have had very little communication with the code enforcement officer about some of these challenges. And it would be, in general, a lot of communities, the code enforcement officer attends periodically, if not every planning board meeting. And I would, propose that we, try to improve communication with the code enforcement officer by, looking at that potential option to have, more communication between the code enforcement officer and the planning board, as many communities have. The last thing I'll say is that personally, I'm interested in looking at, climate adaptation concerns or considerations relative to our ordinances so that we discourage building practices and development practices that make it more difficult to respond to changing climate. So more intense rainstorms may require different types of development. So thinking of green landscaping practices, that sort of thing, water conservation fixtures. There's a lot of different avenues we can pursue there, but I think looking to the impact of climate change on the development activities on the island is a priority of mine.
Thank you, Carol. I think we're all concerned about that. And I, commend you for some of that, some of the big work that you guys have done. I think what we're talking now is probably what we would all think of as minutia, but that it's impacting our everyday life where we're not consistent. Some people are following the rules and some people aren't. And as somebody said, it was enforcement. Anyone else from the planning board who would, yes, Travis.
Thank you. Appreciate this opportunity to engage with you folks. I look forward to more opportunities to engage. I would echo Carol's sentiments about the engagement with the code enforcement would be a top priority in my opinion. I think a lot of the concerns are simply just enforcement actions that need to occur when you let these things. I mean, as a design professional, as an architect, I know that it's you got to follow the rules, and I do that every day when I advise my clients. I do that when I own my house and consider improvements. And I just, I think there's an enforcement piece to this that if you allow to run wild, it festers and it becomes a problem. And I think that's where we're at. As far as tackling the low-hanging fruit, I think we did that effectively right before the deadline for the last town meeting, but it didn't, for whatever reason, work out. But presuming everybody gets their ducks lined up again, we can tackle some more issues and hopefully have a double dose for the next round. But that's certainly something that took a backseat to the open space plan, which is a much more critical document to our path moving forward, and also tackling more of the less low hanging fruit. We need something for guidance so that we're not just stabbing around. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Travis. I think that's good advice to us. Anyone else on the planning board before we open it up to the public? Okay, Jim, anything you want to say before we open up to the public?
Sure, just real quick, I agree that, I haven't been overly involved with the planning board. And, in some small communities, the code officer does kind of act as a quasi planner. And, I think I've had a lot of activity with doing code enforcement functions, and I agree we could use some more staff oversight with some of the planning board functions. And, I'm happy to provide feedback and whatnot. And it's important to understand as well that, I share information via the permit list with all of the community, but really the enforcement action shouldn't be coming from the planning board. It should be coming from, the code officer, which working through the town administrator, working through the select board before I get you guys tied up in courts with a bunch of enforcement actions. And again, being fair and consistent. I work full-time for other communities where we have some very stringent ordinances, but we're consistent in those. And I just caution you, if we're going to be going after one person, we're going to be going after all of them. And I'm happy to do that. But I just want you to know that the unintended consequences that might be coming if we start going after some of these, like that's been suggested. So happy to do that. But, I think we need to look at some of these existing business operations that have been happening and, maybe make a plan for me and the town administrator to look at those case by case because they may be unique. And there's some definitions where, yes, it could fit into that section, but, where it fits in permitted uses or if it needs to go to Board of Adjustments is a bit of a gray area. So happy to work with the planning board and head in the right direction. It's all great feedback. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, I'm going to go to the public. Raise your hand if you would like to speak. And Justin, who's working the computer tonight, will let you in. So to raise your hand, you can go to the bottom and there's a place. Oh, there's one person who has a hand up. Yes, I think it's.
Hi, Donna, it's Michael.
Oh, Michael Porter. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I was involved in exactly this process with the Coastal Waters Ordinance, which came to us as a kind of a package from a combination of what Cumberland had, what Long Island had, and some other ideas people had. So it was a complicated mess. And we had a committee, the Coastal Waters Commission, like the planning board, whose job it was to sort it out. Well, what happened after we had a little discussion about what it ought to be, was we realized a committee isn't going to be able to write this ordinance. And Herb Main, who was then the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, put the finger on me and said, "You do something." So I analyzed what we had in all the different ordinances, different criteria, made an outline that seemed to make sense, ran that by the Coastal Waters and then the Selectmen, and then put the various pieces of ordinance, the various regulations in their places according to that outline. And by and by, we had a much simpler ordinance that the harbor master was able to work with. That's just a suggestion about process from somebody who was there.
Thank you, Michael. Anyone else? Okay, I don't see any other hands up from the public. Anyone else on the Board of Selectmen have anything they'd like to add to this discussion? Okay, it sounds to me, based on, kind of what Jim said, that maybe we'll have an agenda item or another workshop with the Board of Selectmen and, kind of come up with a list of things that we want to send on to the planning board that we feel that need to be addressed in the ordinances. And in the meantime, I think Jen made a good point that if we've got some issues right now, let's identify what those are and deal with them. And I mean, I don't think we have to work on tonight. Anybody who has a horse needs an acre of land for that horse or whatever it is. I mean, there's so much just in scanning through it that we're not doing, but that's kind of minutia and nobody's really worried about it. But why do we have it if we're not going to pay any attention to it? I guess that's my point.
Yep.
Why have we got this complicated thing with all of these things that nobody has any interest, or maybe we have interest, but nobody even knows it's a thing. So, and I'm using the utilities again. You think about the numbers of people who have built houses and had to put in their own power lines. And I have not seen any agendas that said anybody had gone to the Board of Adjustment and Appeals. So, there's all those kinds of things out there. But I really appreciate everybody coming and talking. And I think that we should take the planning board, Bob Ernest and everybody up on, we need to be more active in going to their meetings. And I'm sure you have if people go, they're allowed to speak and participate in your workshops. Is that right? So
Absolutely.
It's a fluid situation. It's not where they just sit there and can't say anything. Okay. Because sometimes the hearings are you have a certain structure in the hearings, but, right? Yeah. Yes, Bob?
Bob has his hand up, Donna.
Yeah.
Every single planning board meeting has an opportunity for public input. Workshops are specifically designed for nothing but public input and conversation with the planning board in a very informal way. The one point I would make, we really, really would love to get suggestions about specific things in the ordinances that need to be improved, the land use ordinances, but please make them specific. Section 304.2 or this paragraph on page 27 of the land use ordinance. It's important that we follow up on the specific situation that an individual from the town or a citizen is talking about. And it's difficult to do that without specifics. I mean, I could go do a word search right now for horse and try to find the thing about an acre. But if I knew what page you were seeing that on, that would be a far more effective way to follow up with something that came to the planning board in writing that we could then respond to in writing. That would be great.
That's a good process. I did actually write down with the page numbers and stuff on a lot of my stuff just because I wanted to find it again. Because my husband did not believe me some of the stuff I was finding. So, Jay, I noticed you're unmuted.
I found the button.
Oh, great. Do you have something you'd like to add before we end? Jen?
No, I've been covered.
Okay. Jen, anything before we end the workshop and go into the regular meeting?
No, I just wanted to, what Jim said was that we need to be fair and consistent, but we need some enforcement. So I just wanted to echo that.
Thanks.
Justin Doty has his hand up. Would you like me to let him in?
Yes, sure. Yeah, because I can't see all the names at once. Justin, yeah, just unmute Justin and you're up good to go.
All right, thank you. Actually, Courtney's in the other room on her phone. She asked that, could you possibly unmute her so she can speak?
Is she on the list? What's her number?
It's a 603.
603, yes. Justin, can you unmute that? Yeah, okay. She's a panelist now. She just has to unmute, Courtney. Just unmute yourself. I don't know how to unmute you. Justin, do you know how to unmute her, or does she have to do it from her? Because she's been elevated.
I can't unmute her manually because she's on a phone. Let me see if I can, I'll look up the instructions. I think it's a star something. On a phone, it's harder to do.
I think it's *5 or something.
Is that what it is?
Star
don't-
five. Courtney,
Star
try,
something. I don't remember the number.
try *5, Carol.
*6.
Oh, *6. Try *6. You're close, Carol.
Can
That
you-
was good.
Can you hear me now?
There you go.
Yes,
Can you hear me?
we can.
Oh, good. All right. Thank you. Justin and I were like trying to figure out, how to speak. But I guess in the end, I just wanted to make note. I felt like it was important to say this as somebody, as part of this community. I just want to get back to like what the purpose of zoning ordinance is, and specifically the difference between a business and a residential zoning ordinance for those pieces. And there might be parts we don't agree with. I think Shebigs do kind of connect the business and residential with Shebig needs, because you can have a boathouse or fishing, commercial stuff on a residential lot. But I also just think that it's ensuring like our vision of Shebig down the road and like what we want Shebig to be. And if we start to just do away with zones that might help us personally, or we don't agree with them, that's getting away from what a zoning ordinance is about. And so I just hope, I'm also not asking for the code enforcement officer to go around seeking people that are breaking codes, but if somebody is making a complaint that's valid, where codes are broken, that's impacting their life, and it's impacting potentially their drinking water or other aspects, I just don't see why that is gray. And we have these codes for a reason. So that complaint should be followed through. And it doesn't mean that every person doing that on the island, but if there's a complaint by somebody and it's valid, that should be followed through it. So, and I just think that that's an important piece, because we want to make sure that we're protecting our aquifer, we're, protecting the environment, and we're also just watching out for the landscape of Shebig for the future. So that's all I wanted to know.
Thank you, Courtney.
Thank you.
Just as a clarification, people often ask the question about why the business area is where the business area is located. And I'll tell you, in 1959, they had the first zoning. And that area was places that were in business in 1959. And it was based on what was happening then, and it's never changed. So it's been the same ever since. Now, businesses have changed in different locations, and as you said, we can, there's special exceptions and you can move things around, but that's basically, what it was. And they were looking at the fishing industry at the time. But so we certainly should give that another look.
Yeah, and I also just want to note, I think business zones and residential zones are put in place to mitigate traffic to certain areas of a town, to keep noise at a certain level in certain areas of a town, and mainly travel. Obviously, people avoid business areas if they have young kids, so maybe they don't want tons of traffic coming in and out of when they're coming out of their driveway. So I just think that those aspects as well and are important to keep in mind. But the current business and resident, I know people might down the road might want changes, but the current business and residential zones are pretty clear. So I think if they're being broken via codes, that should be enforced.
Okay, thank you. All right, anyone else have anything to say on this subject? If not, we'll close the workshop and open the regular meeting. And thank you, Jim. And we'll have a future agenda item for the Board of Selectmen to talk about maybe some specifics. In the meantime, we can all read our zoning ordinance to keep for really excitement, and see how many chickens you can find crossing the road. Thank you. All right, so I'm getting ready to call this meeting to order. If you could, Justin, get the selectmen back as panelists. We've already had the roll call. So this is the time for public comments for items not on the agenda. So I notice we have a lot of people here, so this is your chance. You can talk about any topic that you would like. And just raise your hand so that we can try to accommodate you. All right, I don't see any hands. Do you see any hands, Justin? No.
No.
All right. So we're moving on, and if somebody comes up with some idea later on, raise your hand and we'll try to accommodate you.
Ralph
Right.
just raised his hand.
Oh, Ralph, okay.
I will let him in here.
Yeah. Hey, Ralph.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I don't know if this is the place that you wanted to discuss this, or if you want to discuss it or not, but I think Justin sent a note to all the boards about my concerns about coverage for the ambulance, the EMS.
Yes, I have an item in my report. So once we get there, it should be right off the bat here. I'm usually right in the front, and then we'll bring you back in, Ralph, okay?
Okay, sounds great.
Yep.
Okay, Justin, time for your report. And I think Ralph will be in very quickly.
Yes, I didn't look right at the agenda here. So there isn't, the first item I have on here is the thing that that Ralph brought up, but I'll just go through the other stuff real quick so that we can get that out of the way, and then I'll kind of leave it to Ralph. The second item in there is the transfer study, the transfer station study. It's $1,400. I included it in your packet for you to look at. If there's no objection to the board, I'd like to move that forward. GPCOG will give us a high-level review of some of our information of our fee schedule and what the impact it has on our budget, and the amount of different types of trash that we haul off, and maybe some of the other ways that we might be able to look at how the transfer station is set up. Tony Plant, he used to be the town manager for Wyndham, so he's very familiar with municipal government, and I think he's going to be doing this work on our behalf. He's the chief operations officer of GPCOG, and this is one of the services that they offer. Their member communities, that's why it's as inexpensive as it is. They obviously have to pass on certain fees that don't apply to the other members, but we kind of benefit from using them in the overall cost that we are a member of them, and some of that cost is kind of eaten by the whole group. But anything that's very specific like this, they usually charge a small fee just to make sure that the other towns aren't paying for very specific issues. So I don't know
while
if there's any.
we're on that topic, do any of the other board members have any questions to ask Justin of that? I think that we should probably have a motion and a vote on that, just so there's no question in the future if we that we supported that idea. Anybody have any questions of Justin? Jen?
Do we know how long this study will take?
I don't think that, let me see, did he put a timeline in his, he said something about 30 days. So he thought he would have it done within 30 days from when we authorized him to start the work. It's right at the very bottom of his proposal.
Are we supposed to have this as an agenda item if we're supposed to vote on this? Anything?
I don't think it has to be, because it was in the packet, and we could just authorize him to do it. I just think we need to authorize it, because just how much can you spend, Justin, without money?
The ordinance,
without voting.
the ordinance says that I can authorize up to $1,000, but in practice, it's been almost double that. So it's just a matter of, that's why I bring it to you, just to kind of make sure that you're okay with it with these small dollar amounts. I certainly can include them in the agenda as formal items if you want. It's just not how it has historically been done for these small amounts, but either way is fine with me. I can do it either way.
Yeah, I don't think, I think that we can, what we've done in the past is if things were in Justin's administrative report, and it needed a vote. We just voted on it. But that's up to you guys. Somebody want to make a motion, or do you want to just say not make a motion, or say you don't want him to do it, say you want him to do it? We need to do something, some action one way or the other.
My thoughts are it should be in the motion because we're going to be spending some money.
Okay, do you want to make that motion, Bo?
Yes, I'd like to move that the town administrator goes into contract, I guess, or talks. I don't know what.
Enters into a contract, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, the contract with JP Cog for the amount of $1435.
Okay, is there a second to that? Jay, are you seconding?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion on that? Jen?
So at the end of this study, it's going to help with us looking at how much we charge for trash, how often we have to get it off, the barging situation, all those kind of things.
Yes, and some high level suggestions about how the transfer station could be staged differently. If there are concerns about the operations up there, they would basically let us know that they think it would be worthwhile us hiring somebody to reconfigure that. Typically, you'd use an engineering firm like Woodward and Kern or somebody like that to design a transfer station flow. So they're not going to get into actually designing changes, but they would suggest operational efficiencies that could either be gained by us just doing the work, or they may say that it's completely inadequate and you need to think about redesigning your transfer station.
And the reason that things need to, or are looking at being redesigned, is because of the increase in use of it.
Yes, and or just operational efficiency. As you know, you go up there and there's no flow. A lot of town transfer stations would have an entrance in sort of a circular pattern to the cars, so that they're not just kind of parking wherever they want and creating pedestrian hazards and people just sort of getting stuck because people block them in. So potentially suggestions like that, like maybe there should be a road that goes around the back of the building so that you could kind of have some type of a flow to how people came in and exited. Which could also help Gail keep track of who's coming in and throwing stuff into which container without her being able to see, because it's a free fall up there the way it is now.
Because there is the door out the back now.
We have to keep, we've gone to more of a pattern of keeping that locked now under lock and key, because there's too many people cutting through the brush dump and illegally dumping things up there that then we have to pick up without getting fees.
There's the other thing I think that they were going to do is look at our ordinance and our fee structure. And
Yes.
our ordinance, there's some like language that is opening up areas where people are able to dump things without having to pay or whatever, that that they may be able to find, as well as we're not charging enough to even come close to what it's costing us up there. And so I think they're going to make some of those kinds of suggestions as well, right?
Yes, that's correct. They're going to look at sort of the balance between our fee structure to give us an idea of what percentage of the solid waste costs are being borne by the taxpayers versus the individuals who are dumping things up at the landfill.
And so these are things that we had started with Marjorie, and it kind of, then COVID came and it just all stopped. And so I think that's the kind of the rationale. Here's somebody to help us lead us through this. All right, I need questions or comments from the public. I don't see any. Do you, Justin?
Nope, I don't.
Okay, so I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor?
Yeah.
Mr. Beaupre, I forgot, we have to say this out loud.
Yes.
Mr. Corson,
Yes.
Ms. Beleska,
No,
and Ms. Damon is yes. So it's 3-1 passes. All right, thank you. So now we're going to hear from Ralph. And in the packets, anybody in the public who happened to see it, Ralph has a concern about the lack of EMS. And I'm hoping Ralph's going to not just tell us about the problem, but also have some suggestions of how, what we might do about this. So thank you, Ralph, for coming.
Well, thanks for listening to me. So yeah, I have some concerns about EMS coverage. We have obviously a limited amount of EMTs, and with COVID, it definitely hasn't made it any easier. With all the vaccines, so far we've been okay there, but if the booster actually becomes mandated, which is a possibility, we're going to lose somebody, and we will not be able to do 24-hour coverage. We're going to have lapses in it. So that's a huge concern, obviously. We've never had that before. We've tried to get an EMT class together last year. We worked on it for months to no avail. There was only one class, I believe, that we found, and it just didn't end up with the 2 people that were willing to take it at the time. We're going to start working on trying to find another class or run a class on the island, maybe jointly with Long Island. But right now, I don't have an answer. We talked about, I met with some of the Long Island EMTs a couple of days ago and talked about maybe hiring a per diem and maybe sharing that per diem with Long Island and in the future, and having maybe the per diem work 3 days on Shebig and 2 days on Long Island, and then next week vice versa. It was all kinds of ideas thrown around, but right now I don't have I don't have an answer right now.
Yeah, well, thank you, Ralph. I understand the concern that you have. And is there any chance that we could run a class here?
Potentially. Usually the state main EMS requires you to have a set amount of EMTs or classmates in the class. They've always let us run it with fewer people on Shebig. Right now, we've got one person that's interested and 2 maybes.
What about over to Long Island? I know we've done that together before.
Yeah, it's definitely there's a couple of people over there.
Yeah.
But even we're having a hard time finding an instructor.
Yeah.
Worked months last year to try to find an instructor that would even be willing to teach the class, and we weren't even able to find that last year. So we're going to continue to work on that, but I don't know that I don't know what the outcome's going to be, but we're going to continue to work on it. There's got to be a way to have a class. I just don't know how we're going to do it yet.
So it's good you're in communication with Justin, and he'll keep us up to date or come back whenever you need to.
The other potential is to hire somebody to work over here more than 1 day a week, or maybe continue the 1 day or a week coverage. But even that at this point is difficult to find somebody. Since the governor put the mandates in for the vaccines, every department in the state, not just fire and EMS, or not just EMS, but healthcare in general has been devastated by that. And the departments are all looking to hire people now. So even if we wanted to hire somebody right today, it would be very difficult. Currently, we're paying the per diem $20 an hour, and that's pretty much the low end of the spectrum across the board. We may need to bump that money up, that dollar amount up a little bit to entice people to come to Shebig. But if I don't know what your feelings are either. Obviously, my feelings are that we can't have lapses in coverage, but it may happen. I don't know. I'm not looking for to give you an answer here because I don't have one, but I'd like some feedback on your thoughts on what we can do and what we can't do. I mean, if I come back to you next month and say, we need to hire a per diem and it's going to cost us $25 an hour and we need them 3 days a week, where would we stand?
Well, I think we'd have to figure out where the money was going to come from. That would be part of a discussion you'd have with Justin and come with, a proposal. But so we have, how much are we using a per diem right now?
Well, it actually ran out. We were only going to do it, I think, 3 or 4 months this year,
Okay.
a week. I'd like to find some money and continue that through the rest of the year. It's definitely been a help, but I don't know where the money is going to come from.
So I guess my suggestion would be that you and, that you get as much information as you can, work with Justin and come back with a specific request, and then we'll have to figure out what to do, and then see if we can do what it is that you're requesting. I mean, because right now it's hard to know because we don't know exactly what we're asking for. So that would be, as far as that, for me, that would be helpful. Anybody else on the board have any questions to ask Ralph? We really, we appreciate all you guys do.
I would like to say, I understand it is, I usually come to you with more of a structured.
Right, no, I understand. I'm not.
It's just, if tomorrow, if the governor came out and said, we're going to mandate the booster, we're not going to be able to do the coverage after that date. We just won't have the people just by losing one person. So just to give you an idea how thin we are right now.
Yeah.
I did have one person today call me about wanting to take the EMT class. So we're working on it. I just don't have an answer. I just want to make sure you have a heads up, and we all need to be thinking about, this is going to have a dollar figure behind it.
Yeah. Okay, Justin and then Jay.
I do just want to reiterate, this is a statewide problem at this point. I was at the MMA Executive Committee last week, and Jim Bennett, who's the city manager in Biddeford, with the new positions that his council added to their fire department this year, he is currently at 26 vacancies in his fire department. And there's nobody coming when they post these jobs. So he has no idea what they're going to do. Ralph can support that with just his shift, right? Ralph, you were telling me you've got people leaving your shift in Portland too, right?
Yeah, well, yes, definitely there's people going to be, it's all up in the air. There's a lot of lawsuits going on. Everything's up in the air right now, but there's definitely people leaving. I know, but this is, like you said, it's across the state. It's every fire department out there, and it's every hospital out there. I know Maine Medical Center is losing close to 2,000 workers because of this. So this is a huge problem. I don't have an answer. I haven't heard of anybody that has an answer to this. But yeah, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, it's not your problem. It's your problem.
It is.
I mean, nothing you've done to cause it. And I guess I'm just going to say something right out there. I guess I don't understand. I always thought that anybody that was working in public health would follow whatever the guidelines of public health. And it's, it's not true. And I don't want to get into a political discussion about it. But I feel for you, Ralph. Okay, Jay?
Let me just say one thing to that everybody's willing to follow all the rules. They always have been. But I don't want to get into this. This is a rabbit hole. But there are detrimental effects to this vaccine. I've witnessed them firsthand from more than one person. And that's not reported in the general public on the news and everything. I know people very well that have been affected by this. And I understand why some people would be against getting the booster. That's all. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
Okay.
Ralph, just from an informational point of view, and no politics here or anything else, please, from anywhere. But is the question that there are not classes available? Because it sounds like you've got a couple, possibly 2 or 3 people that would be interested. But the question is there's no place to send them, right?
Well, we're going to look into that, Jay. Again, back last year, about a year ago, we literally spent months talking to Maine EMS, APAMS,
Right.
and also with Southern Maine, with Southern Maine Community College. And we found, I think, one class that was running, but it just did not line up for the 2 people that were willing to take it. They just couldn't make it work. It just wouldn't work. So
yeah, I'm just trying to understand, because my daughter teaches CNAs, and I understand the problems you're facing and going through. But so I was just curious, is if there were the possibility of classes, if we had people, or the real problem is we don't have any classes to send them to.
It's kind of both. I would have no problem with sending somebody to a class. But yeah, a year ago, the classes did not exist. And out of those entities that I spoke of, they were absolutely no help. And I can't emphasize that enough. Maine EMS, the Southern Maine Community College, they didn't even want to reach out to give us any direction or anything. They said, nope, we're not running any classes, and basically hung up on us. It was extremely frustrating. I think obviously it was compounded by the whole pandemic. So that made it all new, because an EMT class, traditionally you have to do certain amount in person. And there were a lot of people that just weren't willing to do the in. So this is a whole new animal that I'm dealing with, and everybody is, that we've never had to deal with before.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right, so now, Justin, you want to finish your report, and then we'll go on to the next item.
I don't have that much else to say, other than I just put a few updates on there as requested about status of the projects. I'm happy to answer any questions that I can. Obviously, I still haven't heard back from Jason. He had the rough duty as he was in Spain, apparently moving his sailboat to the Canary Islands. So he wasn't around.
Not a good
last
place
week.
to be going.
Yeah. So I don't know what he was doing, but that was the text I got when I reached out to him. Other than that, I put when to expect something from the other 2 consultants that are currently working for us.
Okay, any questions, any more questions of Justin from anybody on the board? Okay, seeing none, anybody in the audience have a question to ask the town administrator before we move on? I do not see any hands up. Okay, so next thing on the agenda is to take any action, if any, based on the outcome of the workshop. And I guess my feeling would be that maybe we talk about it under the future agenda item, that, if we want to have some kind of a workshop with just the board to brainstorm areas that we think we should pass on to them. But let's talk about that under the next agenda. Okay, so to hear our update from the Broadband Committee. Is someone here from the Broadband Committee? Michael Porter, can you elevate him? There we go. All right, Michael.
Okay, it says it would like I could speak anyway.
Yes, you can.
Okay, good. Yeah, I have just had, excuse me, a real personal experience that makes me acutely aware of the need for better internet, whether it's broadband, however you define it. Since Monday, I basically had no internet. Something happened to the line. I tried to listen to the cart meeting, and I just left. I just could get little bits and pieces. So I am very lucky that I'm not working from my car parked in front of the library tonight. Fortunately, it got fixed. There's a whole bunch of reasons we need better internet, really. There's Zoom.
Michael,
Yeah.
can I interrupt for just a minute?
Yeah.
I think some of your committee members are maybe on here. Do you want to introduce, I mean, just to tell the board who's actually on the committee who might be on this call?
Yeah, sure. Who's on the committee is Aaron Julian, who I think maybe is not here. I don't know.
His name.
David Hill,
Yeah, he is here.
Gary O'Dirda,
Yeah, he's here.
Hugh Kellum,
I don't see you.
and
Richard Hackle. is
Adam
he on it?
Kagan. Adam Kagan.
Okay, I don't see him. Is Richard Hackle on there?
Richard Hackle, yes.
Yeah, he is on there. Okay. All right, thank you. I just thought, just to acknowledge that those people are on here.
Yeah, and those people have put in a lot of work, as I wouldn't tell you. Just to run briefly over why we need internet again. We need symmetrical internet connections because of Zooming, of course, because working from home, asymmetrical internet like we have now, like most people have now, is maybe all right for watching films or something, but it's not all right for any situation where you have to talk back, like working at home. Telemedicine is another issue which I think for us is going to be important. We have an old population. It's getting older, if I'm an example. So there's lots of reasons to want better internet. We've been around this and around this. In an ideal world, there's a company sitting out there who just thinks it would be the best thing in the world to come into Shebig, build a network, build a fiber network, and sell us service on. That would be wonderful. But that company doesn't exist. We did get one quasi possibility of that sort, and I'll get to it presently. The other option many people have used is Starlink, but that doesn't work for a lot of people, partly because of cost, but also because with Starlink, you need a 25-degree from the horizon view all around. And that means that if you have a tree, your Starlink unit has to be twice the height of the tree away from it. And it has to be the same on the other side. So in some places, like on the East End, for example, where the houses are close together along the North Road, it's just not going to work. The buildings are too close together, even if they cut all the trees down, which I think most people don't want to do. So let me back up and tell you how we got to here, the committee. We spent some time educating ourselves about broadband, of course. We issued an RFP, and I told you that at the last meeting. Since then, we've got 3 responses to the RFP. Notably, we did not get a response from Consolidated. And I know Consolidated has its supporters. I've also heard stories the other direction, but we did get responses from Spectrum, a cable provider, really, from Axiom, as you'd expect, and from Great Works Internet, GWI. They're basically a system operator. Their response was very vague about specifics and costs. I've asked them some more questions, some follow-up questions, and we haven't really got any answers yet. So we're back to basically we have Spectrum and Axiom as options. Spectrum would have the advantage, there's no cost to the town. They would come in and build a cable system. They won't pay for the drops, which is the connections to individual houses. I've asked them how much that might cost. I haven't got an answer yet. Their proposal is not symmetrical. They're proposing to charge us $80 a month for 200 megabits down and 20 megabits up, which doesn't meet the state's criteria sort of for future-proof broadband, which is 100 and 100. The idea the state has is build it once, and then if you need more speed, like you're almost certainly going to want more speed, it'll be, the possibility will be there. And they won't commit, at least so far, again, I've asked the question, not to throttle or put data caps in place. And that's the problem. There's one person that I fairly regularly email, and I've sometimes had emails kicked back explicitly because of throttling. He has Comcast, so explicitly because they're throttling his service. So he doesn't get his email. So I have to resend it, and eventually it maybe gets there. Plus it's Spectrum. And Spectrum is not well liked in Maine as a cable provider. Stories about their service are not a lot of people. Well, there's a lot of stories about anybody. The Axiom proposal, the town would own the whole system. And this means we're up against an obsolescence risk, but I think that's minor. Next 40 years or so anyway, fiber is going to be where it's at, and faster speeds will be available using the same infrastructure, maybe needing new electronics at each end. The budget for this, the cost of the system is $1,300,000 and change. But we would propose to meet that by a combination of bond and grants. And we're in a pretty good place. We'd be in a pretty good place to get a substantial grant from the Connect Maine money. And there's ARPA money around. We already have some 36,000 in the bank somewhere in undesignated funds. And we could probably get we might be able to get another 100,000 from Cumberland County, because they have 57 million to hand out, and broadband is one of the approved uses. The debt service for the bond would be paid by the subscribers. In other words, each subscriber would pay Axiom whatever their fees, excuse me, and Axiom will turn around and pay the town enough to pay the debt service each year. So basically the system is paid for by the subscribers to it. People who don't want it don't have to subscribe to it and don't pay for it. Donna raised last time I spoke to you, a question about summer people. And the program was, the Axiom initially was not sensitive to that, but I pushed them. And now the program proposal they have made is to give summer people an off-season rate of $20 as opposed to $10 they're paying now, which is what the subscriber's contribution is to the construction of the system. So basically, all the summer people will be charged in the off-season is their share of the system construction. And that that seems to me to be fair, and it seems, well, in our small sample on the committee, the summer people on the committee seem to think it's fair because the system has to be built, and it's there all the time. It's not just there in the it's not just there in the summer. It's there all the time. So we'd be looking at a bond of 800 and something thousand, at a grant of maybe somewhere between 400,000 and 500,000 up from Connect Maine, the 36,500 and something that we already have from ARPA, and something, and this I have to ask you about, Justin, is that we need to apply for ARPA funds for, and maybe we might get another 100,000 out of that. They've got 57 million. It looks like 100,000 wouldn't be too much for us. And what I would like from the board now is some specific things. One is we need to schedule a public meeting. And I guess, are we having public meetings at all in person now, or is it everything in Zoom? That's a question for somebody. Justin?
That is to be seen.
That's to be seen. Okay.
I think we're going, Dave, I think we're going week by week.
Okay. We need to, what I want to do is schedule a public meeting for sometime like late next week, because it's time now. We know enough now that we could talk to the public and get their questions, input, and also tell them what's happening. That's number one. Number two is we need, for this to work, we need a town meeting to get bonding authority for, I'm going to say, to be on the real safe side, no more than 975K. That's more than we really expect to spend. But it's like the fire truck this last spring. And we need authority, and the authority from you to, or need to give Justin authority, or whoever needs authority, to apply for a Connect Maine grant application when that comes available. The reason it's a push is that we expect a grant window in November sometime. Nobody's saying yet when, but we've been given hints that there's going to be one in November. And we need to look at the process for getting grants from ARPA, or from Cumberland County of ARPA money. Okay, and now I would listen to questions and I hope answer them.
So Michael, I don't know, we can't guarantee that we would be able to have an in-person meeting next week. I mean, we could try to schedule it, but we don't know. I mean, it's an ever moving target. You know, if something happens as an outbreak or something, and it would have to be, people would have to wear masks, and we'd have to socially distance, and it depends on how many people the hall can fit under those kind of conditions. So I don't know what the answer to that is right now. Maybe we'll talk more about it for a future agenda. Do you want this to be a public hearing of the Broadband Committee or of the Board of Selectmen?
Of the Broadband Committee. It's an informational meeting for the public, really.
Okay, then we don't have to set it up. I mean,
okay, except that I would like to use the town Zoom.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But that I can, if I talk to David, that.
You talk to Justin.
I talk to
I
Justin.
can set that up for you,
Talking about
Michael.
having a meeting at the hall.
Well, in an ideal world, I think that would be nicest, but I think it's probably going to have to be Zoom, just to be safe.
Okay, so there's no problem with the town committee using the town website, I mean, the town's Zoom, unless it's being used by somebody else. So talk to Justin, he's the clearinghouse for that.
Okay, I'll schedule that with Justin, right. I'll get to it.
So I guess what you're asking is responses from the board. Who would like to, anybody have questions or comments that they would like to ask? Jen, Jay, Bo?
Sorry, you can't see my hand because
I can't see you. Is that because your
believe it or
internet
not,
is very good?
just believe it or not, my internet's not very good.
Right, yep.
I'd like to see some of the numbers that you got from Axiom and stuff, and what you're ultimately trying to propose to the town, I guess I should say.
So are you saying, Bo, that you'd like to see a copy of the RFPs that came back and also a written proposal from the Broadband Committee before there's a public hearing?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I kind of agree with
Some
that.
kind of email, or I don't care how it is.
Yeah, I did. I only found out because my internet's been so bad today that this was a Zoom only meeting. So I had planned a handout,
Yeah,
but obviously that doesn't work. But I did email some numbers to people, but I could do that again. Bo, I need your email. Yours got kicked back.
okay, you can find out from calling the town office.
Okay, I took what was on the website and that didn't work. So
Okay. Well, I bet Christine,
Justin, I'll get.
she knows where all the bodies are buried.
Okay, all right, Chris, I'll get on to you and find out all that.
Jay has his hand up.
Michael, thank you for the stuff you dropped off this afternoon.
Welcome. Yeah.
I've read through it. It doesn't change my comments to you from the day before.
Mm-hmm.
I need to see an actual proposal from Axiom,
Mm-hmm.
before I can, not something as, I mean, I need something that's got some body to it, some form, and something where you can actually look at numbers that make sense. I've as I say, I've gone through what you gave me, and it's it just needs a whole lot more before it's a real proposal. And I would like to see something that you can actually sit down and evaluate.
I guess I don't understand quite, but what are you missing?
The financials. I'd like to see some Axiom financials to know that they're going to be around for a couple of years. I would like to see, their proposal is all over the place, and it's strictly based on how much money they think they can get out of, or that we can get out of the town of Cumberland, out of Connect Maine, and so forth. I'd like to see something that's a lot more descriptive of what they're doing financially to make this work. And I'd like to see something about their financials. I mean, if you're in business, you like to know who you're doing business with and what kind of financial shape they're in. And are they going to be able to, live up to their end of the agreement? And I there's none of that. And I think that that's all important in terms of trying to make that decision.
Yeah, I can ask for that. I think it's, in my analysis, it's pretty clear, because if we don't get the grant funding we expect, we probably don't do it. I mean, it's not a, and there aren't, to be honest, a whole pile of options. I mean, people are not lining up to provide us with broadband service.
Well, I understand that. I'd also like to see Axiom have some money in the, in the game, which they don't. I don't think they have the money to put in, but that's another topic.
Oh, well,
which is why I'd like to know more about their finances.
That's probably true, and I can ask for that question. Yeah. Well,
Any other questions, Jay, or any comments, or it sounds like you have more information than the rest of us. So if you've got some good questions, we'd love to have you ask them.
I don't, there's nothing beyond that I can ask for
Right now.
more information so that you can actually make some reasonably informed statements about it.
Okay.
And I don't really have that. And Michael was kind enough to drop some things off, but unfortunately they didn't help me a whole lot, which is why I've asked for what I've asked for.
Okay, thank you. Jen, do you have any comments?
Not at this time.
Okay, thanks. Bo, do you have anything else?
No, thank you.
Yeah, I guess, you know, I haven't seen anything, you know, really in writing, and I kind of am in the same place. I'd like to see the proposals that we got back from all of the people who responded, and something that is set up in such a way that a layman can understand, you know, and maybe they are, but I think that would be helpful. And if there can be some kind of a, you know, some kind of a summary or something that can be publicized ahead of a public meeting so that people come prepared, I think would be helpful.
Yeah, we can do that.
Anyone else on, this is last shot for the board. I'm going to go to the public. Is there anyone in the public who would like to make a comment? Anybody from the committee who would like to, you know, maybe clarify or add to anything that Michael has said? Or have any questions? I saw a hand go up, and now whose hand was it? Oh, 2 or 3 have gone up. Richard Hackle and then Pam Smith.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good. All right, good. Well, I appreciate the comments from Jay, and that. But what we've been looking on the committee is we've been looking at the prices of what things have cost, like with what Axiom's proposal, and we've looked at proposals from around the country, and I would like to just thumbnail guess it's within the realm of proposals from elsewhere. I'm sorry we don't have a better proposal to show you at this point. I sort of thought we might, but I do understand your need to have that in hand to see what we're looking at. But we've just haven't been able to. We've got 3 proposals from the 3 companies, and Consolidated didn't even respond. So we're kind of stuck with something. And Axiom, in my opinion, seems to have provided a very good proposal with the costs and their efforts to get the thing done. I also don't know what their financials are and how if they're going to be in business. But basically, once this thing gets built and Axiom goes bankrupt, then we have this infrastructure that's built. There's any one of number of companies that will step in and take over this project. But that's something in the future. But let's see. I just also would just want to say that I feel like this is a very important part of infrastructure that government is. That's one of the, in my opinion, one of the important aspects of government is to provide infrastructure so that business can proceed. You can't. And I just want to say that and leave it at that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Thanks for your service on that committee.
Sure.
Okay, Pam Smith and then David Hill. I think you're good to go, Pam. Pam, can you hear us? You're unmuted, but we can't hear you.
I can read something that she just wrote in the chat if you want.
Okay, because maybe
says,
she's having
Yeah, she must be having microphone issues. It says, please don't discount Spectrum. We have them on the mainland. And the big plus is you have internet and cell phone service. We've had no issues. Axiom has been great on island this year as seasonal. We pay them in advance for a year of phone service, then each month about $50. 6 months on and off at a seasonal of $10. Don't discount Spectrum. And then, so that I think that might have been her comment. I hope I'm not.
Okay. If there's anything else, Pam, if you're having problems, try again and we'd be happy to hear from you. Okay, before we go to David Hill, while we're in the chat, Gary O'Durda has a comment. As a member of the committee, I support consideration of Axiom. We are glad to provide additional information. I feel the moving ahead with installation of a fiber network is critical to the future of Shebig. And again, thank you, Gary, for serving on that committee. David.
I just want to can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I just want to say very briefly that one of the major differences between what this committee has developed and what we've talked about in the past is that a couple of things. First of all, only the subscribers are going to be paying. The general public will not be. And second of all, and perhaps more importantly, from the town's perspective, is that it is risk-free in that the debt service that the town will be taking on will be serviced by the internet provider, by Axiom, and that's a guarantee. In other words, if they come up short on dollars for a particular month, they will make up that difference. So that leaves no risk to the town for the debt service. And then, of course, there are all the other advantages that have been mentioned. So, thank you.
David, maybe you can answer this question. I forgot to ask Michael. How many years is this bond that you're proposing?
I think it's 15, maybe 10 or 15 years. I'm not really sure. It's more up to the bond bank and to the what the state is doing as far as what the term would be.
The numbers are based on 20.
20 years. Okay. Thank you.
20. Okay.
With the bond bank, we set the term. So whatever the town decided in the end, it goes usually up to 30.
Yeah.
So whatever you wanted to pick, you can pick anything from the top all the way down to whatever the town was comfortable with the payments.
The number Axiom picked, and so we went with was 20, but that's
probably negotiable. Jay.
Usually when you borrow money from the bond bank or anywhere else, there is a useful life of what you're buying, and that determines the length of the bond. And I don't know what they use for a useful life of fiber in the state of Maine, but there's a number somewhere in the books on that. So that's something that should be found out.
I know what Connect Maine is saying, and they're saying 40 years anyway. 40 years minimum.
It's somewhere in the law. There is a defined number.
Well, that's what the executive director of Connect Maine is saying, is 40 years. That's
okay.
I haven't read the law, but that's what she's saying publicly.
Okay, Bo has his hand up.
So I've heard it twice now saying that Axiom will be responsible for paying the bond. What happens to the bond if the company goes belly up in 10 years?
We pay it.
No, we contract with another ISP. Greatworks Internet comes to mind, or First Light Fiber. They come in and are happy with a system, with a ready-made system that is basically coining the money they don't have to do anything for.
I'm sorry, but that sounds like we're rolling the dice on it, is what it sounds like. We're assuming that somebody's going to want to take over infrastructure. Not saying that it's not a good idea and stuff, but it's a lot of money to gamble on, is what I'm getting to.
I wonder if there's if we could have a comparison if we did it 10 years. The life of a company we know could be one day, but it could be 100 years. But so that we could compare what 10 years would be versus 20 years.
You could do that, yeah. I think you'd have a hard time. It'd be difficult to get the repayment out of the subscribers in 10 years.
Oh, yeah, that's true. You mean you'd be charging a lot more money? Yeah. Okay. Don't waste your time. Okay. I was just thinking it was.
Well, I hear you, but
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else from the public? David Hill. You can unmute, David.
I just want to say in response to Bo's question that what we're doing is we're putting an asset in place. And by that, I mean all the fiber optic cable, the equipment to operate the system, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to be a turnkey operation. And if something were to happen to the original operator, it would be a golden opportunity for somebody to come in and get it for a song for the price of the debt service, whatever that is. I think we might even actually, I really do believe this, we might even have a bidding war among people who would like to take over that system were something were to happen to Axiom. Thank you.
Thank you. I can see you need internet, new internet. All right, anyone else in the public? Okay, I'm going to go back to the board for a minute and then we're going to move on. Anyone in the board have any more questions or comments? All right, seeing none. Thank you, Michael, for coming. Thank you for the committee for the work you've been doing. I know you guys have been working really hard. My only advice would be make sure you have as much information out to the public and anticipate what questions might be asked before you have your public meeting.
We'll work on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, now the next thing on the agenda is to talk about communications. And I had a communication, and then the board had several communications from Jeff Putnam regarding the public notice for the CART meeting of September 13th. And according to the policy of the board, it's supposed to be 3 days in advance, and the town office was closed on Friday. It was emergency closing, and we did the best we could to try to advertise that and fell short. We've apologized to Jeff. The CART committee apologized to Jeff, and one thing that just to let people know in the public is that is a policy of the Board of Selectmen as opposed to an ordinance. The Selectmen's ordinance provides for emergency meetings, and this was not a Selectmen's meeting, but those of you who have been on the board before know that we have done this in the past where we had an emergency and all we have to do is contact the media. The media could be the forecaster, the media could be Beverly, it could be anybody. And then we can have a meeting. And so there is a provision for when you have an emergency. But this was inadvertently because of something that was out of our control. And as I said, apologies have been made, and hopefully won't happen again. Anyone else have any correspondence? Justin?
There is one in your packet from MMA
Yes.
looking for a person to be authorized to vote at the MMA convention. As a member of the executive committee, I will be there. So unless one of you would like to vote, I'm happy to do that on your behalf if you want. There's nothing of any consequence on their agenda for this meeting. There's no bylaw amendments or anything like that. It's just minutes and stuff from their last annual meeting.
All right, is there a motion to appoint Justin to vote for the town of Shebig?
So moved.
Okay, so Bo's made a motion. Is there a second? That Justin be able to vote at the MMA convention on the part of the town of Shebig? Or is it someone here who is planning to go to that if they're not going to support this? All right, so we don't,
All
we don't have a second. So the motion dies. You will second it, Jennifer?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. All right, so it's been moved and seconded to appoint Justin. And as he said, there's not much going on, but it does show that the town of Shebig is involved with MMA. It's a great resource for us. And we're fortunate to have that resource. I know anytime that I've had to call them up, whether it's legal or whichever, and their website is great. And they're available to all of the Board of Selectmen. If you don't have a password, you can call the town office and they can tell you how you can, or call them and they'll tell you how to get in. And it's a great resource. So any discussion on that? All right, call for a vote. Mr. Beaupre,
Yes.
Ms. Beleska,
Yes.
okay, Mr. Corson,
Yes.
and Ms. Damon is yes, unanimous. Thank you. All right. Anything else for correspondence from anyone on the board? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to approve the minutes from August 4th, 2021 and September 1st, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? All right, Mr. Beaupre,
Yes.
Mrs. Beleska,
Yes.
Mr. Corson,
Yes.
and Ms. Damon is yes. So it's 4. All right, the next thing on the agenda is talking about future agendas. And one of the recommendations or suggestions that I think that came out of that first workshop was at some point the board have its own workshop and may come with a list of things that we want to send on to the planning board that for them to look into. And is that something that the board is interested in doing? And do we want to set a date for when that will happen? Anybody have any thoughts?
I think we should probably do it during a regular meeting and not an actual, like we did tonight.
Right, that's what I meant, to do it, just set it sometime at the beginning of the meeting as a workshop, so it's a little less formal, where we can just kind of brainstorm a list.
I think we should do it like a month from now.
Okay, what we'll
That
do
will
is,
give us it'll give us a chance to review
right,
some of the ordinances and stuff.
and I'll talk to Justin and we'll try to find a night when there isn't a lot on the agenda. Does that sound good, Jen and Jay?
Yeah, that's fine. I don't think we should be in a particular rush because I think we all really need to read through
Right,
and take a look and spend some time working on it as opposed to sitting down and ad-libbing.
right. And when we do that, take Bob's suggestion that if we come with the page number and the article number, that will make everything, it'll make it easier for everybody. So we'll bring that up later. We're talking about future agendas. Justin, do you think we need to meet next Wednesday? I mean, we've got off our schedule for this week, for this month. Do we have anything pressing that we need to meet next, that, whatever that date is?
It wouldn't be next Wednesday. It would be October 6th, because this is a five
Oh, it's a
Wednesday
5.
month.
Okay, so we don't have a meeting anyway. All
Nope.
right, so we don't have to worry about it.
Yep.
Okay,
October 6th would be your next regularly
Okay.
scheduled meeting.
then we're all set for that. Anyone else have anything that they would like to add to a future agenda that hasn't been discussed tonight? Okay, seeing none. Could we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, moved and seconded. I don't think we have to vote on a motion to adjourn. I think we can just declare we're adjourned. So good night, everybody. Thank you for participating, and thanks for all of the audience that we had tonight. The attendees, we had a good crowd, and thank you for being part of our process. And see you.